And now back to Courage the Cowardly Dog.
We interrupt this program to bring you Courage the Cowardly Dog Show, starring Courage the Cowardly Dog. Abandoned as a pup, he was found by Muriel, who lives in the middle of nowhere with her husband, Eustace Bay. But creepy stuff happens in nowhere. It's up to Courage to save his new home.
This all began with the twisted mind of a man named John R. Dilworth, who grew up admiring the works of some crazy artists, whether it be the films of Charlie Chaplin, the art of Salvador Dali, or the cartoons of Bob Clampett and Tex Avery. After crafting his own studio, Stretch Films Inc., and developed a few of his own animated works like Smart Talk with Raisin for MTV and The Dirty Birdie, he would develop an animated short for Hanna-Barbera as part of What a Cartoon. The short would be a horror comedy about this cowardly dog that has to save his owners from an alien chicken. One notable aspect about this short is that it was heavily inspired by Wallace and Gromit: The Wrong Trousers, especially how the penguin would share similarities to the chicken. The cartoon turned out to be a success far bigger than anyone would ever expect, because not only did Cartoon Network ask Dilworth to turn it into a show, but it also got nominated for an Oscar for Best Animated Short at the 68th Annual Academy Awards, which at the time, the winner was Wallace and Gromit in a close shave. At the start of the show's run, Courage used to have a lot more dialogue, and Eustace was voiced by Lionel Wilson. However, as time would progress, the guys at Cartoon Network felt like Courage was a bit too talkative, and decided to minimize his dialogue in later seasons. As for Eustace, Wilson quit in the middle of the series and ended up being replaced by Arthur Anderson.
Well, judging by the markings and the obvious age of the relic, I'd have to say it would be garbage!
What you hiding from anyway? Can't eat the food.
For those who have watched the whole series, you may have noticed the word Dill popping up occasionally. That's because it's meant as a signature to have Dilworth's name in the show. Another way John put his print there is to have a sketch of himself placed in various areas. Interestingly enough, elements that Dilworth heavily puts emphasis on is sound. Unlike other shows, he didn't want to use old stock sound effects. He and sound designer Michael Geisler had to create a whole bunch of new ones and use whichever are the funniest. As for music, the crew had to create pieces based on sections they've made that Dilworth really enjoyed so that they could emphasize the mood, whether they be funny, suspenseful, or action-packed. There would also be some pieces of classical music in order to pay homage to the classic Looney Tunes cartoons. The series premiered on November 12, 1999, with the first episode presented as A Night at the Cat's Motel, and it was Cartoon Network's highest rated premiere at the time, on top of getting some strong reviews with critics loving the mix of comedy and horror. It would go on for 4 seasons and 52 episodes, while ending it off at the end of 2002. During that time, Courage would go on to win an Annie Award for Best Production Design for an animated TV production for its first episode, and a Golden Reel Award for Best Sound Editing. In 2014, Courage made a comeback in a computer animated special called The Fog of Courage. The one significance with this special is that instead of having Anderson reprising his role as Eustace, the crew brought in Wallace Shawn. Did he do justice to the voice to connect with the old loved ones?
Who cares? I'm gonna be rich! Filthy rich! I'll find you, loved ones!
Okay, so while he goes off and gets his paycheck, why don't I tell you guys a little story? I know a real good one. Alright. Long in a distant land, a shape-shifting master of darkness unleashed an unspeakable evil, but a foolish samurai warrior, wielding a magic
sword, stepped forth to oppose me. Before the final blow was struck, I tore open a portal in time and flung him into the future, where my evil is law. Now the
fool seeks to return to the past and undo the future that is Aku.
The project all began when Genndy Tartakovsky was planning a new series after the big success he had with Dexter's Laboratory. As someone who was always fascinated by samurai culture, he was highly intrigued with the Frank Miller comic book series Ronin, which tells the story of a legendary samurai warrior trapped in a dystopian future who pursues to battle a shape-shifting demon. This would then give Tartakovsky an idea to make something with a similar concept, but executed more differently than what audiences are more accustomed. You see, Genndy was not really a fan of works that are supposed to be action-packed, but contain too much plot to get to the good stuff. So he decided to have his show be focused a lot more on the action and the stylized art than the story. This is why there wouldn't be much dialogue in the series, and that the storyboard artist would be in charge of developing the story of the episodes more so than the writers. Also, considering that this is a show for Cartoon Network, the crew can't have it be super violent and let Jack cut people into ribbons. This is why most of the enemies Jack would battle are robots, heavy machinery, and other non-organic creatures. For the style of the visuals, the team would take several sources of inspiration in order to capture the right feeling for the lighting, storyboarding, and effects like split screens. Of course, there was the works of Frank Miller like Ronin, as I've already mentioned, but the others include avant-garde films of the 1970s, the movies of Akira Kurosawa, action flicks like Conan the Barbarian, and animated works like Akira. The show made its premiere on August 10th, 2001, and received massive praise from critics, especially for the artistry in the animation and how that is controlling the story more than the script. Throughout its original run, Jack would go on to get some big rewards, and I don't mean just the small stuff from festivals. I mean trophies like 6 Annie Awards and 4 Primetime Emmys. The show would go on until September 25th, 2004, where it would stop at the end of its 4th season with a total of 52 episodes. The reason why it ended so abruptly was because, at the time, Tartakovsky and the crew at Cartoon Network weren't sure if there would be a continuation to the story. That, and they were already preoccupied working on Clone Wars for Lucasfilm, which really goes to show that you can't really do anything else when you have Star Wars on the mind. That takes priority over anything. But anyways, if there would have to be a reason why he didn't just decide to make a few more episodes to finish off the series, it's because he had bigger plans for the finale. It wouldn't just end off with an episode. Oh, no. It would end off with an entire movie. Ever since the start of the show's run, Genndy was always on a mission to create that Samurai Jack movie. Rather it be discussing if it would be live action or 2D animation, or talking with studios like New Line Cinema, Frederator Films, Sony Pictures, or Bad Robot Productions, the idea kept floating around for years. But ultimately, the movie never became a reality. However, this does not mean that it's over for Jack in general. On October 2013, IDW Publishing released a comic series that would continue the adventures of the samurai written by Jim Zub with art by Andy Suriano. The comic would help keep Jack in the spotlight until May of 2015 with 20 issues and a special. While that was happening, Toonami was re-airing old episodes of the show in 2014, and interest of Jack on TV reopened. So much so that Adult Swim executive Mike Lazo and Tartakovsky talked about making that conclusion that the samurai deserved. Maybe not as a movie, but as a 5th season with 10 episodes. And so, a few months after the comic was finished, Adult Swim announced that Samurai Jack will be coming back to almost its former glory. Considering that the show would now air on Cartoon Network's adult-oriented block, it gave the crew more liberty to include some mature content, but not too much so that it would still maintain the tone of the previous 4 seasons. Since the original voice of Aku, Mako, passed away in 2006, the crew decided to replace his voice with Greg Baldwin, who previously replaced Mako after his death for another animated series, Avatar: The Last Airbender, as Uncle Iroh. The 5th season would premiere on March 11th, 2017, and was beloved by audiences and critics alike for the show to come back like how it was back in the early 2000s, but with a more mature tone. Whenever the episodes would air, it would always find itself among the top 10 original cable telecasts of that day, and some of them would even reach up to number 1 and would later give Jack an additional 4 Emmy Awards. It wouldn't be until May 20th, 2017, when the 62nd episode aired and would finally conclude the 16-year adventure of Samurai Jack. But there is one more thing that would ultimately finish this story. A few months later, on October 16th of that year, Adult Swim and Fathom Events technically fulfilled Gendy's lifelong dream of having Samurai Jack on the big screen. However, it wasn't the planned movie that would end off the series, but rather a remastered high-definition version of the first episodes for one night only, and the day afterwards, the studio would release a Blu-ray set of the complete collection. Whew, that was quite a journey right over there. Okay, so, now that we are back in the past, it was at this point here where the channel would go experience its first big change. Now, we have seen it set itself to become the big cartoon channel on television, but let us see how it can go and handle being under new management. On June 18th, 2001, Cartoon Network's first president, Benny Cohen, officially stepped down due to creative differences with the head of Turner Broadcasting. 2 months later, the network finally found their new president in the form of Jim Samples. His first big move onto the channel was opening the late-night adult-oriented block Adult Swim on September 2nd of that year, which would open brand new possibilities for Cartoon Network to now feature successful series aimed for older audiences. Later on, in July of 2002, the network released its first theatrical feature film with the Powerpuff Girls movie. Overall, the film ended up doing good. Not great, but just good. Critics were enjoying it fine, and it made $16.4 million at the box office. Sure, it's not really impressive, especially with an $11 million budget, but it was a good start for the network to expand their capabilities. Another way it did so at the time was when the channel decided to get more in touch with its dark side and gave us a show like Grim and Evil. The show is about 2 kids, Billy and Mandy, who would meet the Grim Reaper. But after losing a match of Limbo, he's now stuck living with the 2 kids and remains with them as their best friend forever. However, that's only half of the series. The other part is about Hector Con Carne, an evil crime lord that got caught in an explosion caused by his enemies. Luckily, his brain and his stomach was salvaged and placed on a dumb Russian circus bear named Boskov. Now that he's back in business alongside with Dr. Ghastly and General Scar, Con Carne is ready to return to his plans for world domination. Ever since he was a kid, Maxwell Adams has always had a strange fascination with stuff like monsters and the occult. It would both scare and amaze him to where he always liked to try new and weird stuff. One great example is a thesis he made in college in the form of an animated short called Billy and Mandy in Trepanation of the Skull and You, a parody of those educational cartoons of the 1950s where Billy learns the marvels of trepanning and ends up getting drilled in the head by Mandy. On a side note, this short was never seen in the public until April 30th, 2016 at the Tromanimation Film Festival. Fast forwarding a few years later, Cartoon Network held a special event on its channel called Cartoon Network's Big Pick, where audiences could vote for which cartoon they would like to see become a series. During the finals, it ultimately went down to Whatever Happened to Robot Jones, Longhair and Doubledrome, and The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, where Adams took his old characters and gave them an update along with adding the Grim Reaper into the mix. For the voice of Grim, Adams originally wanted to have it be British in the veins of Dr. Smith from Lost in Space. It wouldn't be until he was having fun with Greg Eagles during his audition and discovered that a Jamaican accent was the perfect fit for the character.
Welcome to Limbo, where we be playing my favorite game, Bimbo!
In the end, the big winner was The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy by getting 57% of the viewers' votes, with Robot Jones in second by getting 23%. However, Jones would eventually end up getting his own short-lived series in 2002. Between the time Maxwell finished that pilot and winning the big pick, the network allowed him to make a second cartoon in the meantime, which he decided to make something that was inspired by his love for action-oriented media such as animated shows and action figures like G.I. Joe. When asked to have that turn into a series as well, the creator decided to do something similar to Cow and Chicken, where the main series would be grim and give more attention to that, while Evil would have a short episode in between that would be reminiscent to I Am Weasel. The series made its premiere on August 24, 2001, but ended up being very short-lived by only getting 13 episodes in 2 seasons, with its end on October 2002. So, does this mark the end of the series? Well, yes and no. Yes, because now Grim and Evil is over. But no, because in the following year, Cartoon Network decided to split the cartoons to have their own separate shows, with The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy premiering on June 13, 2003, and Evil Con Carne on July 11th of that year. For Adams, it was a bit too much work to simultaneously work on 2 shows, and he had more enthusiasm over Grimm. So what ended up happening with Con Carne is that the series ended off short on October 2004 with only 13 episodes, half of which recycled from the previous episodes done for Grim and Evil. As for Billy and Mandy, the show proved to be much more successful, so much so that General Scar from Con Carne moved in as a regular character for the series.
So why'd you move to this dump?
We got bought out by a big entertainment corporation. It seems they didn't want the competition for world domination.
The show would gather some positive reviews and won 2 Emmys and an Annie Award. The new show would go on for a total of 6 seasons with 77 episodes, but it wouldn't be fully over afterwards. In 2007, 2 TV specials were created showing bigger adventures with the characters, including Billy and Mandy's Big Boogie Adventure and Billy and Mandy, The Wrath of the Spider Queen. In 2008, Adams and his team created a special spin-off special called Underfist Halloween Bash, which stars some of the side characters from the series like Irwin, Scar, Jeff the Spider, Hoss, and Fred Fredburger, where they team up to fight off evil chocolate bar monsters led by a marshmallow bunny. It was originally going to be the start of a new series where Adams would play with some of the other characters from Billy and Mandy, but things didn't work out at the studio, so he ended up leaving Cartoon Network to end up being at Disney on Fishhooks, thus ending off Billy and Mandy's adventures. While those kids were literally playing around with the Grim Reaper, other kids were always on a mission in codename Kids Next Door. In a giant treehouse known as Sector 5, 5 kids that are numbered from 1 through 5 are on a mission to fight off adults, seniors, teens, and delightful children from down the lane from making kids from around the globe miserable in a secret worldwide organization called Kids Next Door. Of course, where else can we start this but when the creator himself was a kid? Tom Ward Burton was someone who always loved to draw. Even at an early age, he got into Japanese animation from Hayao Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky to Robotech and Gundam. He always enjoyed reading those comics like the X-Men series and was fascinated with the idea of a secret organization going out to always save the world from evil. After starting up a career in animation by working on shows like Doug, Beavis and Butthead, Schoolhouse Rock, and Pepper Ann, Ward Burton went to Hanna-Barbera in order to create a pilot for a series called Kenny and the Chimp, where a boy would always end up in trouble caused by his dumb chimpanzee named Chimpy. The pilot aired on the first spin-off show of What a Cartoon called The Cartoon Cartoon Show in 1998. But unfortunately, the series never saw the light of day. Well, actually it did, but not as Kenny and the Chimp. You see, originally, there was this group of troublemaking kids called the Kids Next Door that would always end up putting Kenny in a bad situation. Tom would then take these characters and change them up to be more like secret agents that would fight off evil adults. He sent the pitch onto Cartoon Network, and they let him take a shot at crafting another potential series. In August of 2001, Cartoon Network put up their second big pick event and put up 10 pilots for viewers to vote on. One of which being Kids Next Door with its pilot titled No Pee in the Ool. Out of a total of more than 220,000 votes, Kids Next Door ended up as the big winner of the contest by earning more than a quarter of those votes. The runner-ups of the event include A Kitty Bobo Show and My Freaky Family. The series made its premiere on December 6, 2002, and during its run, it became one of the channel's biggest shows in the mid-2000s. On a side note, small elements of Kenny and the Chimp would find its way onto KND, including Professor Triple Extra Large becoming a regular villain in the series.
And then Professor Triple Extra Large! Will completely change the world for kids everywhere.
The show had a good long run, going for a total of 6 seasons with 78 episodes, ending off 5 years after its premiere on December 7th, 2007. Around the end of its run, a TV movie and a couple of series were made. The movie was called Operation Zero, where the kids next door have to stop an evil mastermind named Grandfather from turning the whole world into senior zombies. As for the specials, the first one was called The Grim Adventures of the Kids Next Door, a crossover with The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, and the other was Operation Interviews, which told the story of their final mission with Number 1, making it as the true finale of Kids Next Door on January 21st, 2008.
Kids Next Door! Kids Next Door!